Okay, so picture this. You've finally made it home after a long, hard journey. You've got the land you were promised. So, why on earth would you suddenly demand a king to rule over you? For the ancient tribes of Israel, this wasn't just some political whim. It was the result of a crisis that had been brewing for centuries.
So here's the deal. The tribes of Israel have their land, but they're totally fractured. They don't have a central leader, no unifying force, and a huge part of an ancient promise made to their ancestor Abraham is still missing. And this isn't just some small detail, it's the very thing that's going to push them into chaos and eventually to demand a king. To really get why they felt so desperate, we've got to rewind. Let's go way back to the very beginning, to the foundational promise that was supposed to define their entire future. According to the book of Genesis, their forefather Abraham was promised three big things. Thing one, land for his descendants. Thing two, a royal dynasty, a line of kings. And thing three, a universal blessing for the whole world that would come through them. And here's the kicker. By the time our story picks up, that first promise, check. It's done. They're living in the promised land of Canaan. But that second promise, the one about a royal dynasty, nope, completely untouched. So you've got this people with land, but absolutely no leadership. And that, right there, is a recipe for disaster.
So, what happens when a nation has land but no leader? Well, that power vacuum plunged them into this dark, repeating cycle of chaos, an era we now know as the time of the Judges. You see, after the initial conquest under their leader Joshua, Israel didn't just become this one big, unified kingdom. No way. Instead, they were more like a loose collection of scattered, confused, and incredibly vulnerable tribes, and each one was pretty much left to fend for itself.
This whole era fell into this really demoralizing and honestly super predictable pattern. First, the people would sin, abandoning their covenant. Then, they'd get crushed by their enemies. In their desperation, they would cry out for help. And finally, a temporary leader, a judge, would pop up and save them, only for the entire destructive cycle to begin all over again.
And the consequences? Oh, they were brutal. The book of Judges says their sin left them in the hands of hostile neighbors. You've got the Philistines on the coasts, the Moabites and Midianites to the east. Without a king or a central army, they were just caught in this endless cycle of war and defeat. But just when things seem completely hopeless, when the spiritual life of the nation is at rock bottom, the turning point for the entire future of Israel doesn't begin with a battle or a king. Nope, it all starts with the quiet, desperate prayer of one woman. There's this woman named Hannah, and she's heartbroken because she's barren. So she makes this solemn vow in the temple. She prays for a son, and in return, she promises to dedicate him entirely to God's service for his entire life. Her story really tells you just how dire the spiritual state of the nation was. The high priest, a man named Eli, sees her praying so intensely, her lips moving silently, that he actually accuses her of being drunk. Think about that. True, heartfelt prayer had become so rare that even the high priest couldn't recognize it.
And this is where the spiritual crisis becomes crystal clear. On one side, you've got the corrupt religious establishment. Eli's own sons are described as scoundrels who disrespected holy offerings. And on the other side, you have this young boy, Samuel, born from that desperate prayer, faithfully serving God.
Samuel's arrival couldn't have come at a more critical time. This was an age where divine communication had pretty much stopped. It was a time of deep spiritual silence. And into that silence, a new voice was about to speak. So now there's a new legitimate spiritual leader in the prophet Samuel. And after centuries of being worn down by chaos, the people of Israel finally see a way out of their endless painful cycle, and they decide to make a demand.
So after all this turmoil, after generations of being scattered and oppressed, what do you think they asked for? What was the one thing they believed could finally unite them, protect them, and make them just like all the other nations? Their answer would change their nation forever.
They completely rejected the old system. They were done with the temporary judges. Instead, they demanded what every other powerful nation around them had, a king to lead them, to fight their battles, and to govern them.
And this is where we see the profound, sobering consequence of their demand. God tells Samuel that this isn't just about politics. In asking for a human king, the people were actually rejecting God himself as their true ruler. They were trying to fulfill that promise of a royal dynasty,
but they were doing it on their own terms, setting the stage for a new and much more complicated chapter in their history.